Good afternoon. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Spokane area, welcome to our 2020 General Election Candidate Forum, featuring candidates for State Representative Legislative District 4, Position 2. I am Lisa Kuhar, your moderator, and Mike Bell of the League is the timer. Election day for the 2020 general election is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Ballots will be mailed to all registered voters about 3 weeks before Election Day and must be postmarked or deposited in conveniently located ballot boxes no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. You can register to vote by mail or online by October 26, 2020. You can register in person or drop off your ballots through October 31st at the Spokane County Elections Office at 1033 West Gardner Avenue or at Center Place, 2426 North Discovery Place, Spokane Valley, and on November 2nd and 3rd at the Veterans Memorial North Entrance at 751 West Boone Avenue. For other questions about casting your ballot or information about the candidates, contact the Spokane County Elections Office at phone number 509-477-2320 or visit their website, spokanecounty.org/elections, or on the League of Women Voters online voters guide, Vote 411 at 411.org. I will be asking the candidates questions that have been formulated by the League's Voter Services Committee, and will ask as many questions as time allows. Before the questions begin, the candidates will have 30 seconds to introduce themselves and tell the voters why they are running. Candidates will have up to 1 minute to answer each question, with additional time for a rebuttal or follow-up question as appropriate. And each candidate will have the opportunity for a 30-second closing statement. The first speaker will alternate with each question. Now I will introduce the candidates. They are Rob Chase, Republican, and Lance Gurel, Democrat. Starting with you, Mr. Chase, you will have 30 seconds to tell us why you're running for state representative in Legislative District 4, Position 2.
Hey, thank you, League of Women Voters, and my opponent, Lance Gurel. I have lived in the 4th District since 1985, and I've been an activist in politics for the last 25 years. I've actually held public office for 8 years as Spokane County Treasurer, and I have the endorsements of our current legislators, Matt Shea and Bob McCaslin. So I'm looking forward to a good debate, as I always have, with the League of Women Voters.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Gurel, why are you running for state representative?
Again, I want to thank the League for offering this forum. We have a hard time getting out to voters, and I really appreciate this. I also want to note the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who also did so much to help bring women the vote. It's time for a change. For too long, we've had extremists representing us in Olympia. My opponent supports the same kinds of policies, and I believe it's time that we had representatives who represented the true values of Eastern Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Gurel. We'll move on to the questions. And the first question will go to you, Mr. Gurel. What do you consider to be the most important responsibilities of a state legislator, and what specific training, experience, and skills do you have that have prepared you for this position?
I think the most important responsibility of a representative is to accurately reflect the values of the community that they represent. I think it's important to understand that we have communities made up of a number of different people, and to truly represent all of those interests is paramount. The most important issue that's going to be facing us this coming session is over the budget shortfall and what we do to make sure that we have sufficient revenue and sufficient budgeting to make sure that our infrastructure stays intact and that our essential services are continued. I've worked for 25 years as a certified public accountant. I've worked with budgets I know how to make the sophisticated choices and hard choices to make sure that we spend our money well.
Thank you, Mr. Gurel. Appreciate that. Mr. Chase, same question. What do you consider to be the most important responsibilities of a state legislator, and what specific training, experience, and skills do you have that have prepared you for this position?
Well, of course, I believe the most important duties are to represent the people of your district and their values. I'm a conservative, and the 4th District has voted conservatively now for many decades. So along those lines, I think the most important things we have to deal with, number one being, how do we deal with a pandemic if one comes through again? I think that we've, overreacted, in this state and many other states and across the globe to this pandemic. And so I think it should have been, it's been too stringent. And because it's been too stringent and overreacting, I think we've destroyed a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, and we've also ruined a lot of people's lives. So that's a hidden thing that you don't see. You see all the statistics, which are all across the board of who had COVID and how many people contracted it, how many people died. The average age of a COVID victim was 80 years old. So
Thank you.
We have to take a lot of these things into account.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Let's just segue right into the next question. You're up first, Mr. Chase. The public health system promotes and protects the health of residents and the communities in which they live. Generally speaking, and with respect to the state's response to COVID-19, do you think our public health system is adequately funded, and are there specific improvements you think are needed?
Well, I think it's adequately funded, but you have to spend your money in the right ways, and you have to make decisions that either that have to add value and not waste. And I think overall, this has been a bad experience for a lot of people, and not only in the 4th District, but all across our country, as I alluded to earlier. So I think, that you should never take away constitutional rights no matter what. And I believe in volunteerism rather than coercion. So I think businesses should have allowed to stay open if they wanted to stay open. People could or could not, participate in those businesses. And, and I think, wearing the mask, there's a lot of questions about that. Does it even work when you have a beard, which a lot of people do? And we have to see people with designer masks and just like little rags across their face. So there's nothing, it's kind of like enforced conformance to everything. And I think if you're going to make a mistake, it ought to be on the side of freedom. And also, we've got to look at the revenues.
Thank you. We will get to the revenues in another question. Thank you, Mr. Chase. Mr. Gurel, same question. The public health system promotes and protects the health of residents and the communities in which they live. Generally speaking, and with respect to the state's response to COVID-19, do you think our public health system is adequately funded? Are there specific improvements that you think are needed?
I had the pleasure of going to a State of the Valley meeting yesterday that was held by the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. And a survey of business owners, small business owners in Washington and Idaho and Oregon gave a really different answer than what Mr. Chase is giving. There is a small minority of people who think that we overreacted. But in general, business owners continue to be optimistic about the future and believe that they've made that they need to make accommodations for us to safely be able to go back to work and go back to school. I think that public health deserves to be adequately funded and adequately respected with regards to the decisions that are made about our communities.
Thank you. This question goes to you first, Mr. Gurel. What has been done and what else can you propose to assist small businesses who are facing serious financial loss because of COVID?
Well, there's no doubt that businesses are struggling. A number of businesses are in industries that will have a hard time coming back as we find the need to stay more distant than we were before. I think that it's important to have a growth mindset about what needs to happen for our community, and to continue to encourage small businesses to make the adaptations that are necessary in this climate. One of the things that I think is extremely important is to put more emphasis into childcare and childcare as a necessary infrastructure to help us go back to work during this COVID time. People can't go back to work if they don't feel safe and don't feel like their children are safe.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chase, same question to you. What has been done and what else can you propose to assist small businesses who are facing serious financial loss because of the COVID-19?
Well, a business is like a life. It's a roller coaster. We went down with revenues. A lot of businesses went down. But I doorbelled every business in the 4th District along with Bob and Chasm. And most of the people we spoke to, especially the smaller businesses, thought we did overreact. And the problem with that is our last big national event was 9/11. Well, at that time we passed the Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, STA, and a lot of other acts, many of them unconstitutional. But they're only supposed to be temporary. So these are going to be temporary, the things we're doing, or every time a pandemic or the flu go through, are we going to have to suit up again? So, I think we need to look at legislation that will limit the amount of time the governor has, for these powers, and it actually call a session of the legislator and deal with it. And I'm not sure how many people were at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, but the figures I had was, totally most of them were against it. And we've had pandemics come through before, and we didn't do these same things.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. This question will start with you, Mr. Chase. What spending cuts, new revenue sources, or tax reform measures would you support at the state level in order to maintain a balanced budget, given the significant impact of COVID-19 on revenue and expenditures? Are there any areas of spending that you think should be exempt from cuts?
Well, I think we have to look at everything because the revenues will be down for quite a while. It's hard to say how long that will be, but whatever we spend, it has to be adding value rather than waste. So I think we need to take a hard look at everything. Now, my opponent, Lance Gurel, is for adding income tax, which I don't agree with because I think an income tax, it penalizes productivity. And we have that we should be looking at some kind of maybe even new taxes. There is, like the fair tax at the state level. And also we could look at other avenues to replace those revenues, like charging the big tech companies like Facebook and Google and everybody like that for the money that they're getting that isn't taxed, from all the advertising they do and all the information they gather on us too. So I think we should have a fiscal note drawn up on that and see what the impact would be to the state.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gurel, same question. What spending cuts, new revenue sources, or tax reform measures would you support at the state level in order to maintain a balanced budget, given the significant impact of COVID-19 on revenue and expenditures? Are there any areas of spending that you think should be exempt from cuts?
I think it's essential that we spend and budget money to keep our infrastructure repaired and to keep a safety net. There are only 5% of our budget goes to actual administrative tasks of the government. Most of it goes to services that we as citizens require. Mr. Chase is right. I believe that people making over $1 million should start paying their fair share to the state. I personally think that it's wrong for us to let our infrastructure go into disrepair and crumble. I personally don't want to face my grandchildren, and when they ask, why didn't you fix the infrastructure when you had a chance in your generation, when things could be fixed for pennies on the dollar? I'm not going to answer to them, it's because we didn't want to tax millionaires.
Thank you, Mr. Gurel. The next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Gurel. How important do you think it is to address climate change, and what specific actions, if any, would you support at the state level?
Well, I believe in science. I believe in what the scientists and the doctors tell us. I think that climate change is real. I think that there are a number of changes we can make so that we can make sure that our human activities don't make climate change worse. And at the same time, a lot of things like moving to cleaner energy will make our lives better, reduce pollution, reduce the need to have trains coming through our community with increasing frequency. Climate change is real. And again, this is a chance for us to be good stewards of our environment, be good stewards of our world, and turn over a world to our grandchildren where we say, we weren't sure who caused climate change, but it's real and we did what we could.
Thank you, Mr. Gurel. Mr. Chase, same question. How important do you think it is to address climate change, and what specific actions, if any, would you support at the state level?
Well, climate change, I believe in climate change, of course. You can tell that from tree rings or from glaciers that the climate has gone up or down in the past. As far as CO2, affecting things, if you look at the amount of man-made CO2 in fact, the amount of CO2 within the atmosphere is 0.04 parts per million, or 0.04%. And man-made CO2 is actually 3% of that. So if the atmosphere is 100 miles thick, it's only the last 68 feet that would be man-made CO2 out of 100 miles. So, and we need CO2 to live. So I just think the whole CO2 thing has been, over-exaggerated, the impact that it has. Now, there are other things we can look at. We can look at geothermal energy, tidal platforms, these hydrogen cells. And there's a lot of things around. We just have to be able to look at it. Maybe even fusion reactors and these salt iodine reactors they're talking to. So I think there's a lot of things we can do that are better than oil that we are using now.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. And now you'll start on this question, Mr. Chase. What are your greatest concerns about the criminal justice system in Washington, and how would you address them? What improvements, if any, have been made in recent years, and what concerns do you still have?
Well, criminal justice, that's one of the main reasons, we have government is to protect our rights and our lives. And so we need to have some measure of government. And I'm against defunding the police. I think they have their necessary role, and it's not easy to be a policeman. It takes a lot of training, a lot of patience. You've got to get the right people on the police force. And, with thousands of police, you're going to get a few bad apples in there. But, let's not defund the police because of a few incidents. I mean, who are you going to call when you need things like that? And I think, all the policemen I've met pretty much are good, solid citizens, and they feel like they're doing something very honorable. Some people are meant to be policemen, others are not. And so I think the criminal justice system, making sure we have true justice and not the delay of the law, but law acting, in its role of protecting rights is most important to focus on.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gurel, same question. What are your greatest concerns about the criminal justice system in Washington, and how would you address them? What improvements, if any, have been made in recent years, and what concerns do you still have?
I believe that we have dumped too many of our community responsibilities on law enforcement. We expect law enforcement to take care of a lot of the problems of our communities that need to be better addressed in other ways. One of the first things I would do to improve the criminal justice system is to greatly increase funding for mental health services. There's no reason that our neighbors need to end up homeless or end up in the criminal justice system because they've lacked access to adequate mental health services. I also believe it's very important that we have community oversight of law enforcement. I think communities should be the ones who decide what their law enforcement agency should look like, and then hire the best and give them the funding that they need to do the job that we ask them to do, and give these other jobs to other people.
Thank you, sir. For the next question, Mr. Gurel, you'll go first. Senate Bill 5395, passed by the legislature in 2020 and subsequently suspended pending the results of referendum 90 in the 2020 general election, requires all schools to provide comprehensive sexual health education by the 2022-2023 school year. Do you support or oppose Senate Bill 5395, and what are your reasons for your position?
I support the Senate bill, and I support the referendum. I think it's very important that young people be taught the basics of consent and bodily autonomy. The very basis of this law is that local communities, local school districts, and local parents make the decisions about what is appropriate for their children. I think that this is the way that it should be done. I think it should be done with local authority. And to me, opposing the bill just opposes the rights of parents to have a say in these very important matters. I've had people very close to me involved in sexual abuse, and I think that it is necessary, and I think that we should trust our schools and our communities to monitor it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chase, same question. Senate
Well,
Bill, do you need me to read it again?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Senate Bill 5395, passed by the legislature in 2020 and subsequently suspended pending the results of referendum 90 in the 2020 general election, requires all schools to provide comprehensive sexual health education by the 2022-23 school year. Do you support or oppose Senate Bill 5395, and what are your reasons for your position?
Well, I believe in subsidiarity. If you're going to make a decision, it should be made as locally as you can possibly. And I think sex education, belongs first of all in the home by the parents. And I think a lot of what's being taught now is starting too early. Kids, a lot of these things kids don't really need to know about at their age. So I think it's more, better to be in the parents' hands. It's hard to legislate morality, and of course, sexual activity and morality go hand in hand. So leave it up to the parents and the churches. So I'm all for that.
Thank you, sir. Next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Chase. What legislative committees are you most interested in serving on?
I would like to serve on the Finance Committee. As a Spokane County Treasurer, I was able to spearhead legislation based on the people that came into my office to allow partial payments of property taxes, any amount, any time. That way they could fit into their budgets. And it actually passed. We're the only county in the state that still allows that partial payments. And it used to be, that you could pay twice a year, and that's because people couldn't afford to pay all their taxes at once. That goes back to when it was more agricultural. People had to wait for their crops to come in so they could pay the second half of their property taxes. But when it's partial payments, any amount, any time, our staff loved it in the treasurer's office. The people loved it. A lot of people got caught up in their taxes by having the partial payments. The other thing I'd like to do is to get rid of the penalties. Those are usurious on property taxes. The second month you're behind your property taxes, in addition to the 12% penalty, there's a 3% penalty on top of that. And 9 months later, there's an 8% penalty on top of that. So in the first year, you're paying 23% interest, which is usury.
Thank you, sir. Same question to you, Mr. Gurel. What legislative committees are you most interested in serving on?
I'm an accountant. I'm a certified public accountant, and I would certainly hope to use my skills in the Appropriations Committee to work on budgets. I believe that I have the temperament to be able to make the hard decisions and to look at what's best for everybody in making decisions. I would also like to serve in some aspect on transportation. Our transportation infrastructure is a huge, huge problem for us if we don't fund the preservation of our bridges and roads, and if we don't work together to support the funding of the major projects like the BNSF, Pines separation, grade separation. I pledge as a state legislator to support the requests of the Spokane Regional Transportation Council.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gurel, what are your top priorities for the legislative action in 2021?
I think that we need an overhaul of our taxation and revenue system. We have a very upside down tax system that relies primarily on consumer taxes that fall primarily on working people and families and allow the wealthy and wealthy corporations to avoid taxation. Business and occupation taxes and sales tax make up the vast majority of our taxes, and in a pandemic recession like we have where consumer spending is down, obviously our spending goes down. So we need to have sophisticated conversations to improve the funding of our state government so that we do not have to cut essential services, and so that we can add more revenue, more influence to things like early childhood education and mental health services.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chase, what are your top priorities for legislative action in 2021?
Well, I think first of all, dealing with this COVID thing, so that when the cold and flu season comes through again, we don't overreact and mask up, and we have to think smartly about that, because we've talked about the amount of revenues are way down, that they're going to be coming in. So we have to make sure that we are able to replace those revenues. And the other thing too is on transportation. I've worked in the past with Senator Hasagawa on starting a state bank like North Dakota has. And I think a state bank like North Dakota, in 2008, when all the other banks were failing, they had a banner year that year, but they invested in infrastructure. So I think a simple infrastructure bank with a good firewall between the legislature and the lawmakers and the politicians, and but it still be controlled by revenue monies coming, and that you could borrow, or you could invest with, instead of investing in bonds, which are a top, or sort of too low right now, then we'd have to use our own $1 billion like we have in Spokane County to invest in local Department of Transportation things.
Thank you, Mr. Chase.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will now go for your closing statements. We'll begin with you, Mr. Chase. You have 30 seconds, please, sir.
Okay. My whole thing, my motto is truth matters. So I think we need to have transparency and truth. Then we know what we're dealing with. So I've seen government be very secretive, and at the federal, state, and local level. So I think we have to identify priorities, work across the aisles. I've demonstrated I have before, and I have a reputation for getting things done. So I will do the best job I can to represent the 4th District, and I will see anybody at any time who wants to speak to me and give me the input they think I need.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gurel, your closing statement.
This election is about more than party loyalty. We must come together to stand against extremism, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. I pledge to vote for the important transportation priorities of my area. I pledge to use my expertise as a CPA to help with the budget deficit, and I pledge not to waste your money attempting to split Washington into a separate state, Eastern Washington into a separate state.
Thank you, sir.
Lance Gurel, www.votelanceGurel.com.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you both. This concludes our 2020 General Election Candidate Forum featuring State Representative Legislative District 4, Position 2 candidates. Again, they are Rob Chase, Republican, and Lance Gurel, Democrat. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you to our candidates for participation in this forum. We hope this has given you, the voters, information that will help you make an informed decision when marking your ballots by Election Day Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. For more information, visit our website. That would be lwvspokane.org, or our online voters guide, Vote 411, at vote411.org. Thank you.